for speaking. Dr. Tippy's coming later. Terry Schwartz from the CUDC should be here momentarily. And we're not sure Charles Graves is going to come or not. He's probably teaching his class. But, yeah. This is Dr. Balek Golias, who some of you may have had as a professor before. And Drew McEwen, who's an architect in Cleveland, just recently started his own office. And is going to be doing some neat things with the CUDC as well. So, you might work with him in the future. So I'll leave the introduction to a minimum. These guys have done a little bit of extra to talk about what the project is, but basically, as you know, it's a 400 unit housing development with the associated amenities that go with that. They're looking at this as a mixed income model, and at some point they're going to have to prove that their rules about the mixed income actually becomes profitable for the developer. But, at this point, they're doing their first presentation of what they want the master plan to be, and their background is going to be of an activist nature. That's the research they're engaged in, and that's what they're going to bring to the project here is some form of activism. So each one of them will announce what the research topic is during the presentation, and they've developed a site for the group. And this is the yellow team. Go ahead, guys.
Can you turn off the lights?
Yeah, you want the lights on? More?
Yeah. Everything off will be pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty dark, but it's alright. So hi, I'm Timothy Ong. That's Derek Chang, and this is AJ. And we are together working on a master plan for Kenya under the title PUMA. The reason why we thought of PUMA was because PUMA is a very agile and fast animal, just like how our mass in our master plan's range. It's very fast getting downhill. So just a quick brief on our projects before we get started with the nitty-gritty. It's located in Africa, Rwanda, in the city of Kigali, and in the township of Kinyinya. You can see it's pretty central in all diagrams. And that's where our site is located in the project. As you can see, the diagram on the top right of the screen shows the distance from nearby cities. They are all walkable distances. 4.8 to the capital. It's I think I mixed up miles and kilometers there, but they are all very walkable distances, very far from the city center. So it's actually a pretty good strategic location for a project like this to take place. Okay, so to our concept, we are focusing on three major themes. The first being movement of the people, the second being economic sustenance, and the third being faith. And all these three themes aim to promote human flourishing in Kenya.
So the economy of Rwanda basically consists of 9% of agricultural and about 10% of industrial. So we thought in this project we get a little bit closer look at what the agricultural side of the economy is. The most exported products from the agricultural side is coffee and tea. You can see them around Starbucks, Caribou, and basically kind of is the export goes to these franchise coffee shops around the world to help generate income to Rwanda. And because of the history, Rwanda is actually one of the top innovator in agricultural production.
And one other thing that we observe is that our site currently now is farmland. So if we build on the site, we are basically eliminating a lot of farmland. So we had to think about, how do we keep farmland as the main agricultural system The second thing that we looked at was energy in Rwanda, and like we looked at how Rwandans don't consume much energy at all. Compared to the Americans, Rwandans only consume 23 kilowatt hours per capita compared to 11,000 in the United States. So it's a ridiculously low amount. The energy though is very, very expensive in Rwanda because there is almost all form of energy in Rwanda is imported. Therefore, it's very expensive. That made us think about localizing energy within the site and local energy production systems. Transit. There is an increasing amount of cars in Rwanda. Just like many developing countries, they're just like bustling with cars because they think cars can bring them places really quickly. But it's just causing a lot of congestion in Rwanda as we Skyped with a fellow person in Kigali and he was complaining about the congestion. The bus systems are overcrowded. So basically, transit systems are pretty much on the rise. They are developing, but they are still experiencing a lot of issues at the moment. And the only new connection that they are probably going to have is a trans-African connection, which isn't a local connection, connection between cities. So not a lot of thought has been put into the advancement of transportation systems within Kigali itself. So we were thinking along those lines.
In the religious aspects of Rwanda, we know that over about 90%, even closer to 95% of the Rwandan population are Christians or go to different sects of Christianity churches. So a central theme since the 1994 genocide is this theme of forgiveness, and the church, because of the wrongs that happened all throughout the country, they really want to push and stretch this theme of forgiveness as well as through community, and how they kind of both intersect with each other through the church, the building, and the people.
So with this cultural context, cultural research in mind, we started looking at some processes, like how we would like to develop our master plan. So just site, we analyzed the site. The font is terribly small, but we looked at the topography, top left. We looked at how it slopes downhill on the top right diagram, and how people are constantly moving downwards. We also looked at the intersection of major roads, as shown by the bottom left diagram, and we thought about possibly locating a transportation hub to connect the entire Kenyanya community. We also looked at how the slight slopes downwards and how views will be actually aimed away from the hill and towards the bottom of the hill. So with that, we came up with some responses. Just like the first top left diagram, just a lot about thinking about zoning and how we arrange the masses. Because of the view downwards, we wanted all of our buildings to face the bottom of the hill. And that was our initial response for something like this, where all the buildings were facing downhill and general movement of the site was very left to right, rather than top to bottom. Then Derek will take it from now.
Okay, so we take a look at how the movement are, and as you can see, one of it was that we want to get the people down to the bottom, and the other one is to kind of exploring the site a little bit. I'm not sure. Yeah. So that's the two movement we kind of explored. As you see, the blue one is sort of the how do you get to some place as quick as possible, and the other one is kind of exploring. Both of them has their sort of benefits, so we decided to kind of merge them together and see what the good thing about it would be. So since this is really about community, we thought about how we can bring the people together because we have low income, we have high income. But how do we get them to interact each other without really let the thing ignoring each other? So we put the high and lower income. We first experimented putting the lower income at the top. This is basically the revised version at the top, and then top of the site, and then the higher income at the lower part of the site. The the effective of that is that the lower income can come down, and because they're going to the community center or the church to socialize, so they can communicate with the higher income. So in this way, when they go to the church, when they go to social, they can be friends, they make friends, and then they can talk. And then when they go up, it wouldn't be a hazard because they're walking and time will fly when they're talk. So it's basically sort of this understanding move that we're trying to bring into the site and let community flourish. So this is the result. We merge the two kind of circulation together so that you will get this fluid movement from the top to the bottom. And I'm not the church is sort of this kind of gathering point because all the community is basically coming down on this point right here. So, sorry. So you would have a good opportunity for people to social. Yeah.
Okay. Moving on. So from the additional analysis that we did about movement, we sort of developed the plan from there, and we disregarded a little bit more the initial plan. We wanted to respond to the movement of people downhill and the movement of the wind through the site. As you can see, it's a very north. It comes from the southeast.
Well, actually,
and northwest.
sorry. This is only part of the where the wind comes from. It actually comes from the northeast.
Northeast.
So in either way you look at it, it's still the wind still goes through. It still works.
Mm-hmm.
So
and this helped. And as we continued the movement of the masses towards the bottom of the hill, the central location in the site, we extended the masses to even to bridge over the roads to create an even more fluid flow of mass. And we finally reached our master plan, our final master plan, which is very fluid and moves the people towards the bottom of the site where the church is. And that is the center of our community. So as you can see, this is our solution. Our solution, we have the programmatic elements are listed on the right. As you can see, we have a lot of the residential buildings are more towards the left, and as we approach the central road, the buildings become mixed in use. So there are basically businesses downtown as well as residents living on top. This would allow a lot of convenience. We also densely packed all the buildings together. There's a lot of reasons why density should be used, especially for efficiency, just close interactions between people, and things like that. I don't know. So, how does our site incorporate movement? Okay, I think we need to look at our handy dandy board, but it's really
We're
hard.
ready for like.
so I bring over here.
Yeah, I mean we can show it like this. So first, design dignifies walking and
Top one.
the use of mass transit in hopes of like reducing the congestion that is currently developing in Kenya. We want to dignify walking spaces, and therefore we create very useful walking paths around the site. As you can see, there are back alleys behind the masses, which will be convenient for delivery services and those kind of career services to happen. And it wouldn't like I would say be really mixed with those the walkers. The design unifies the movement of people across the site. As we saw previously, before any massing was introduced, the movement was very cluttered, was very unorganized. But because of the arrangement of the masses, the movement of the people is very systematic. It's very organized. It's very there is a certain path of movement that we want people to take, and um, the design increases the number of moments along the lines of movement. As people move down the site, they will be able to engage in various experiences, be it small pocket spaces between the buildings, be it with the people along the site, um, with the shop owners along the site, sky gardens on the rooftops of the buildings, as you can see. We need to talk more about farming. Um,
Tell us about the farming.
Well, the farming is actually we introduced it inside the unit. However, we're still in the kind of developmental stage, so we didn't put too much emphasis on that. But basically, what we want to do is reintroduce kind of first this community or personal farming inside each unit. So as you can see over here, maybe it shows that there will be rooftop gardens introduced where owners can actually plant their own plants so they can be sustainable. And actually, we have, I'm sorry, it's hard, but we have our developmental stage over here as what we thought a kind of sustainable farming could be. And these are in the means of maybe a physical rotational device that can be placed somewhere that kind of rotates each plant according to how much plants they need, how much water they need. We also just thought of how they could be mixed in with this kind of vertical farming. So we are in the process of experimenting how light could go down into the space to provide adequate enough of lighting to each of these plants. And these are basically our early stages of experiments. And yeah.
Yeah, basically we are still in a very developmental phase of farming because we plan to use farming on a very individual unit-based level rather than on a large scale. Therefore, it is a bit more difficult to see as because we actually thought about farming as we developed the master plan. So, but just a bit more about movement before we move on. The movement of the wind along the site due to the wind tunnels will increase the wind speed and will hopefully be sufficient to generate wind energy for individual units. Because we want to use so little power, just a little bit of wind energy might be sufficient to generate power for the houses. We actually initially thought about even hydropower because how water flows down the site, but we did some calculations that it wouldn't suffice for hydropower. And you want to move to the next slide? Okay.
So sort of kind of explained this a little bit before, but basically the individual plants in these housing will provide kind of the self-sustaining communities, and and there will be kind of these residents could probably get some kind of market out of these vegetation or vegetables as they plant, and also on kind of a spiritual side is just basically a good environment and a good air, because if you have vegetation or inside these houses, it would be kind of bring good air for the residents to breathe each morning they would wake up. So yes, it's kind of trying to facilitate this idea of improving the life, and yeah.
And then sort of answer the question of why we centered a lot of our project around meeting the church at the bottom, and kind of everything pointing to the church in a sense. So again, one of our biggest goals in this project was to create community, like we've been hinting at with the flow and getting people to interact in the high and low income. And so we saw the church as this link to be able to create a deeper sense of community in this area, potentially in the best way, and for multiple reasons. So we set to it to, like I said, through community, bringing it to community, there's also, we're providing better social conditions, which lends to this theme of forgiveness. So by essentially having like some sort of linking to, so this is like, these are housing units. If we have like different sort of, not just regular like low or high income housing units, but like maybe even free like refugee housing units that are directly connected to the church. That would be one way of showing through the church, through this like direct connection, that they want to help with what has happened 20 years ago, as well as connecting it to the health clinics that we're going to have as part of that, connected to the church, and just showing that the church wants to be involved in interacting with the community and the society in a positive physical way, as well as spiritual, which is kind of that last point, that there is a deeper sense of community that can happen, especially in such a Christian populated area and country, that goes beyond maybe just having like nice buildings, which as architects we love to have. And I think that there is a certain sense of joy and pride that comes in that, but maybe even more so in having this church, which is more than a nice building, but also provides this sense of spiritual connectedness and togetherness. It is also, the whole master plan really lends itself to this idea through the directions of the buildings and the flow, and through especially the water element, gathering at the bottom, kind of this metaphorical idea, like, and I'll steal professors' idea on this because it's good, but so when Jesus, first started talking to his future disciples, he called them to be fishers of men because they were fishermen, and so this idea that all this water is gathering at the bottom and collecting all these people, just like Jesus would collect his people to be like fishermen, basically. So the church is collecting people kind of physically and spiritually.
So the last few images are just renderings of the site. This is the view from the church, instead of on the site, viewing uphill. And last section, which would probably be the street. And you can see how the water feature becomes a main connecting element of the street, and it's a very nice type environment. Yeah. So thank you. This is our design thus far.
Before you leave off, could you show the overall site model and talk about what the lowlands are and a little bit about the circulation? It doesn't show very much up there, but what is the issue with the lower areas?
The lower areas.
The valley.
Lowlands.
Yeah, that's the answer. So, as you can see there, it's a steep site. Kigali's the term Milcaline comes from the French. It's a city of 1,000 hills, basically. So you can see here that there's hill after hill after hill, and it would have been nice to see like an aerial photo in the presentation. But basically, this is one hill among many, and the translation between all of them it has to do with connections. But between every single hill, there's a valley floor that's preserved wetlands. So 20% of, or 50% of Kigali, I think, is pretty much reserved for either wetland or areas where the slope instances are more than 20%. So a lot of Kigali is unbuildable, and that's why I think there's a big push on this site, which is buildable, for a more dense kind of model than what you would normally see here in Kigali, which on this hill, for instance, they would probably just develop it as sprawling suburban type homes. But these guys have made a big push for density here because they have the site for it.
Yeah, as you can see, the site's actually pretty steep. If you look at the sections, it's very steep. One of this declines is actually 5 meters high, which is 15 feet. Any questions? Or critiques? Or let's get on.
Yeah, maybe you bring your board out. Talk about the architectural drawings. Basically, they're at a spot right now where they've developed their program. They know what they want to do with the site, but this is very early stages of design. So any design ideas or even program ideas are welcome.
Sure. All right. Take copious notes here instead of time. Do you want to start with?
Real singer.
Yeah. I think overall, the way that you approach the site is actually pretty strong. The idea of kind of creating these pedestrian streets that move, down the hill makes sense because people like to walk downhill. If you give somebody the choice, take an uphill path or a downhill path, they will go downhill. Which means that after you come out of the church, you're kind of stuck with that uphill climb. So I don't know metaphorically if there's something about that, but I think the way that you're kind of allowing people to matriculate through the site to the bottom is actually really strong. And that questions at first glance, looking at the diagram, the swaths of the water cutting through there, but then the other sketch you had where it was kind of it was more of like these small streams that crenulated through, made the scale seem a lot more appropriate. And I think that's something that from an urban standpoint doesn't read very well because I don't have a sense of scale from these drawings. And the other thing that came up was this idea of this economic stratification, where you have like the poor people at the top of the hill and the not so poor people at the bottom of the hill. And I'm looking at the architecture as you're kind of presenting it, and to me everything looks basically the same. So I guess the question is kind of like one of economics. Like, what is the economic driver that makes somebody pay more to live at the bottom of the hill? Is it just proximity to the church? And more importantly, is taking your economic class and stratifying your community based on how much money they have. Historically, does that make any sense?
This is actually kind of I guess it's hard for not mentioning it a little bit more, but we actually developed to a point that that we didn't separate it. We kind of cooperate. I'm very sorry, but like we had like a lot of things that we want to put in, but we don't want to drag any more time. So we actually put kind of the lower income and higher income kind of together in one kind of 2-level unit. So the person who has like a middle income, I guess, gets more amenities, and then the lower income kind of gets sort of from the unit gets the basic necessity. So yeah,
Smaller floor space and those kind of everything.
Yeah, you certainly don't want to segregate.
Yeah, that was sort of the initial, but then we kind of, yeah.
Okay. And I mean, I think there's a lot of like really nice nuance to this that you didn't get a chance to touch on. The play fields, the soccer fields and stuff off to the side is an interesting aspect, and it's kind of bordered by that school. So there's like that green space of the school. I guess when I think about urban planning or city development or neighborhood development, and I think about the things that are like the focal points of any community. You typically have your religious institution like the church, which this whole thing is kind of centered on. And then you usually have school, because a lot of people choose where they live based upon the school systems. And then there'll be some sort of commercial spine, which is where you'll get your goods, your foods, and whatever, clothing, et cetera, et cetera. And so these become primarily the focal points in the public spaces, and they each kind of have like their own little public green space or lawn or something for people to congregate and collect. And so the church is kind of this very, formal kind of backdrop, or to the whole form. We've got this this water forescape to it. But then the school, and I don't know if this is, and this could just be a presentation thing. Contextually, I'm wondering like what's happening to the east or even to the north, because if there is more neighborhood, you know, over there, then I think the school becomes like this whole area. And I don't know how big this site is as a whole. It might have been mentioned earlier on.
Oh yeah, it's about 350 meters from one corner to the other. So it's pretty big.
So it's about 2
Well,
miles roughly, huh?
No,
5280 feet to a mile.
5,280.
It's not
Oh,